Hello, my dear friends and fellow developers. Welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to continue our journey in which we are discussing different topics related to our LWC framework. We have came a long way in which we discussed different topics like what is binding, how to achieve it, what are getter, how to implement getters in our LWC framework. We have also seen different types of decorators like API, track. We have also seen how can we make our fields reactive and many more examples. If you want a refresher, I will attach a link in the description to this playlist. You can go through the playlist and have a quick refresher about all the topics. So let's begin and see what's stored in our today's session. So today we'll discuss about Shadow DOM. So why we are discussing this topic? So basically, Shadow DOM is a concept or basically a web standard which is used by our LWC framework under the hood to actually do the processing and do some encapsulation. So let's discuss. So what is Shadow DOM? So basically, Shadow DOM is a web standard that encapsulates the element of a component to keep styling and behavior consistent in any context. So what it does is like it basically encapsulates the elements in a component so that the styling and behavior remains consistent in that context. So basically, let's suppose it can be thought of as a container inside which we have our elements and our styling and behavior, and it is encapsulated or it is clubbed together so that the leaking should not happen to different components or to the parent component. So for that purpose, Shadow DOM has been used over here. The second point is the main point actually. So as you can see that Shadow DOM is not supported by all browsers. So what LWC does is like it doesn't use Shadow DOM directly, instead of which it uses Shadow DOM polyfill. So what is polyfill? So polyfill is basically a code that allows a feature to work in a web browser. So Shadow DOM is not directly used by our LWC framework, instead of which it uses Shadow DOM polyfill. So let's understand what is actually Shadow DOM and how it actually works with an example. So here we have one example named as recipe hello component, which contains UI card with some markups. So now this is how it looks like in the developer console, or you can say in our Visual Studio Code when you are developing LWC component. So what we have over here, we have one UI card, and inside which we have did. So this is how it looks like in our normal coding practices when we are designing or developing an LWC component. But under the hood, what happens is like basically it is segregates this entire component in containerization, in which it uses this practice like shadow root, and then certain components. So basically, shadow root is kind of an parent node inside which we have certain components. So in div, this is the shadow root which we have, and in case of UI, this is the shadow root which we have. So let's see how it actually works. So whenever the component renders in the browser, the elements are encapsulated in a shadow tree. So this entire container which we have discussed so far, like shadow root and inside which the certain components. So this all things are considered as a shadow tree, and the shadow tree is a part of an DOM also, but it is hidden in which it is contained. So since it is using encapsulation as a concept, so basically whatever it has in this shadow tree, it is not visible to the parent component or other component. So the encapsulation is done over here. The third point is like the shadow tree affects how you work in DOM session event. So basically, with the shadow tree, since we are achieving encapsulation, so whatever we define inside the shadow tree, so it will be encapsulated in the same thing and it will not leak out. So this is the few pointers, like how shadow tree works over here. Now, so far we have seen that shadow root. So what is shadow root? So basically, shadow root is a boundary with which is basically used to separate the normal DOM and the shadow tree. So wherever you will see the shadow root, this is the top node of that shadow tree, and basically it is an kind of a boundary which separates the actual DOM with the shadow tree component. So basically, this boundary is known as shadow boundary. So shadow root is basically an identifier with the help of which we can segregate the actual DOM with the shadow tree components. So that's how it is used. Now there are some key points which we should remember when we are working or when we are taking into consideration what is shadow DOM. So shadow root. So shadow root is the topmost node of a shadow tree. Okay, this is one of the foremost things. So this is a topmost node. Before that, there will be nothing in that particular shadow tree. Now the node is attached to a regular DOM node called an host element. So here the host element can be thought of as C child. So this is the host element inside which we have a shadow tree. So in this scenario, this is acting as an boundary which is attached to the host element. Then the third point says that the shadow root isn't an element; it is a document fragment. So basically, what it means is like this is not an actual element which is used in our LWC framework. This is kind of a document fragment. So what document framework does is like it is just an interface which doesn't have any parent. So you can thought of it is like as a minimalistic document which is used for our theory purpose only, so that we can segregate it. So that's how the shadow root comes into picture. Now, when we talk about shadow boundary, so as we discussed in our previous slide, that shadow boundary is basically an boundary line between the shadow root and the host element. So the same has been mentioned over here also. The second thing is like shadow boundary is it basically determines where the shadow tree structure ends and where the actual DOM, or you can say regular DOM structure starts. So basically, shadow boundary is used to distinguish between these parameters, which is regular DOM and which is the shadow DOM. Now, the major or one interview question might come over here, like how you can say what is light DOM and what is shadow DOM, and basically it depends on the point of view. So if we take this example in which we have one parent component inside which we have one child component. Okay. So now if we talk about this child component, so what we will do for this particular component, this is the actual DOM. Okay, because it has this only component. So for this purpose, this C child will treat it as an normal regular DOM. But when we embed this child component in any parent component, so now for that purpose, what it will do, this shadow root will become the light term for the parent component. So basically, totally perspective, like when we talk about what is a regular DOM and what is light DOM, and if you want to identify, so it is totally relative, like based on the perspective from which point of view you are seeing. If you are seeing from the child perspective, so this will act as a regular DOM. But if you will embed it in any parent component, so it will act as a light DOM or shadow DOM. These are some key points which we should discuss, like what is shadow root, what is shadow boundary, some of the key points. So that is pretty much for our today's session, in which we discussed what is shadow dom, and we have also discussed what is shadow boundary and shadow root. If you have any doubts, you can comment the doubts in the comment section. I will go through all the comments and try to help you with your queries. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you like my content, please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.